Thank you, Mona. Yes, hopefully now we're going to be joined by Al-Ahram Weekly Managing Editor, Mr. Khaled Dawood. Are you there with us, sir?
Yes, Mark, I'm there.
Thanks for being here with us, Khaled. Now, why do you think Egypt is so firm in its rejection of the rhetoric coming out of Israel of seeking a greater Israel?
Well, thanks, Mark, for having me. Of course, because this alleged plan of so-called Greater Israel, if carried out, would include some of Egypt's territory designated as part of this extremist vision of Israel that some early Zionists had when Israel came into existence. But generally speaking, that direct threat to Egypt's security, of course, with the Israeli Prime Minister comes out and says he has some historic and spiritual mission to achieve this so-called Greater Israel. So definitely Egypt and all other Arab countries involved, including, in this case, Jordan, Lebanon, would definitely feel threatened by those kinds of statements coming from the top authority in Israel, not just some extremist minister or some member of parliament in Israel. No, it's the Israeli Prime Minister himself. That's basically going back to some very early extremist vision of Israel. At the time, everybody was hoping and working on a totally different course. Basically, first to end the war in Gaza, and after that to start a political process that would end up with the establishment of an independent conflict for many years to come, if the real intentions of the Israeli Prime Minister is to carry out this dream or illusion of so-called Greater Israel.
Well, of course, Egypt and Qatar and the United States are seeking a ceasefire. As we stand today, are we any closer to that happening?
Well, I mean, it seems difficult so far to look for this step. There are a lot of efforts that are taking place. As you know, different proposals that are being placed on the table, particularly when it comes to the flow of humanitarian assistance into the Gaza Strip. This is being very active on that level, and we've seen an increase in the amount of aid that's going into Gaza over the past few weeks due to Egyptian efforts to at least alleviate this tremendous suffering of the Palestinian people. And at the same time, we've seen a delegation by the Hamas organization that ended a visit to Cairo, I think yesterday or a little bit earlier than that, after meeting with top Egyptian officials in hope to revive the negotiations that were going on in Doha over a ceasefire and a permanent end to the war in Gaza. Whether the United States, particularly President Donald Trump, is willing to make those efforts successful by pressing Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire instead of expanding the war and working on the plan he announced recently to conquer Gaza. I guess that would be one factor to bring us closer to this ceasefire. But so far, the Americans, the U.S. President Donald Trump, has given Israel and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu the green light to do whatever he wants in Gaza, thinking that military pressure might result in changing the position of Hamas, which is pretty strange because the same arguments have been repeated over and over again by the Israeli Prime Minister about the need to occupy one part or the other of Gaza, and then that would lead to victory. But the result is only more suffering and death is among the Palestinians.
And of course, we have France, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, perhaps New Zealand, maybe more countries who are going to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN next month. Is this purely symbolic, or could it have some effect?
You know, I wouldn't get into describing it as purely symbolic. I mean, it's, people who say this, including, of course, U.S. President Donald Trump and the Secretary of State, are saying that it is symbolic and meaningless because the United States will always block the creation of the Palestinian state through the United Nations Security Council. But if it was that symbolic or meaningless, there would be no reason for the United States and Israel to react so angrily to announcements made by France, Britain, Canada, Australia, and all the other countries that said that they want to take this stand at this very critical point because they want to bring Israel back to the basis of the conflict with the Palestinians, which is allowing Palestinians to practice their right to self-determination and to have their own independent state. At the time, we are hearing all these plans to expand the war and even annex the West Bank through the expansion of settlements in particularly in Jerusalem, occupied Jerusalem, with the aim of dividing the West Bank and preventing Palestinians from having any connections with Jerusalem and basically killing the hope of the Palestinian state. So definitely the position of very influential countries such as Britain and France, who are both permanent members of the Security Council, is going to add pressure on Israel in order to recognize that the world does not consist of the United States alone, and that if they continue with this kind of policies and killing and starvation of the Palestinian people, Israel will definitely be isolated on an international level. And as we can see, the matter is not just market related to the recognition of Palestinian state. Countries like the Netherlands have been banning extremist ministers in the Netanyahu government, such as Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, from entering the Netherlands or the territory. Other European nations are considering similar steps, but also there are more important steps that the Europeans can take up with banning the weapons they provide to Israel and reconsidering the partnership agreement the EU has with Israel because of its failure to respect part of that agreement related to respecting Palestinian rights and the recognition of the Palestinian state. So there are many other steps that these European countries, Canada, Australia, and others can take in order to make such move of recognition of the state more influential than the move of making this announcement or issuing a statement with the.
Now, of course, you mentioned there the starvation of the people of Gaza and what the people of Gaza are suffering right now. 70% of aid to Gaza comes via Egypt. How difficult is it to achieve the relief that they need under these current restrictions?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to recall the statement that's been issued yesterday by more than 100 humanitarian organizations, the very prominent ones, including Oxfam and CARE and Doctors Without Borders and others, all the organizations that are active worldwide in humanitarian organizations, totally blaming the Israeli side for this starvation of the Palestinian people and pointing out the fact that they already have hundreds, if not thousands, of trucks that are stuck and waiting for months on the Egyptian side of the border in order to get into Gaza. And the key party that's responsible for preventing this aid from getting into Gaza is Israel, while noting, of course, the Egyptian effort to let in whatever possible. That's basically what's allowed by Israel through the Karma Abu Salem crossing point on the southern borders of Gaza. But at the same time, what's entering Gaza so far, despite the entire world pressure, is basically a trickle of what they need inside Gaza, whether in terms of food and medicine and, of course, fuel, where there is a huge shortage, preventing the hospitals or other key services from being provided to the Palestinian people. So certainly the Israelis are using the starvation policy and the policy of preventing the entry of aid as part of their tactics to pressure Hamas to respond to their requests concerning maintaining the presence of Israeli troops in Gaza, and also other demands that are being repeated by Netanyahu, such as disarming Hamas or even expelling its leadership from Gaza or the Strip. So as you can see, these are political goals in which food is being used as a weapon against the Palestinians.